Persian Gulf Massacre 13. American Heroes. Slaughtered by Iranian missiles in 40 days of hell. The Persian Gulf has long been a powder keg of geopolitical tension, where the world's most critical energy arteries meet the ambitions of regional powers and the strategic interests of global superpowers. In early 2026, that tension ignited into open conflict. What began as a U.S.-Israeli operation targeting Iran's nuclear facilities and missile capabilities, dubbed Operation Epic Fury, quickly escalated into a brutal 40-day campaign marked by Iranian retaliation across the Gulf region. By the time a fragile ceasefire took hold around April 7th or 8th, 2026, at least 13 American service members had been killed in action, with hundreds more wounded. Iranian missiles, drones, and asymmetric attacks struck U.S. and allied positions in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and beyond, turning forward operating bases, ports, and naval assets into kill zones. This essay examines the events, context, human cost, and broader implications of what some have called the Persian Gulf Massacre, a period of intense fighting where Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles, combined with swarms of drones, inflicted the first significant combat deaths on U.S. forces in a direct confrontation with the Islamic Republic in decades. It is a story of heroism under fire, the fog of war, strategic miscalculations, and the enduring reality that modern conflict in the Middle East extracts a terrible price from those who serve on the front lines. The 13 fallen Americans represent not just statistics, but individual lives, sons, daughters, husbands, wives, and parents who answered the call of duty in one of the world's most dangerous theaters. The spark, from nuclear tensions to open war. The road to the 2026 conflict stretched back years, rooted in Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missile development, support for proxy militias, Hezbollah, Houthis, Shia groups in Iraq and Syria, and repeated attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and Red Sea. By late 2025, intelligence assessments indicated Iran was nearing breakout capacity for a nuclear weapon, prompting coordinated U.S. and Israeli planning for preventive strikes. On February 28, 2026, the operation launched with airstrikes and missile attacks on key Iranian sites, including Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan nuclear facilities, air defense systems, missile production plants, and naval assets. Iran's response was swift and asymmetric. Tehran had long threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of global oil passes, and to target U.S. bases ringing the Persian Gulf. Within hours and days, Iranian forces unleashed barrages of ballistic missiles, such as the Fateh, Zulfiqar, and longer-range variants, and Shahed-style drones toward U.S. positions in Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC countries. These strikes aimed to impose costs on American forces supporting the operation, deter further escalation, and rally domestic support by portraying Iran as resisting imperialist aggression. Early Iranian claims and some media reports spoke of heavy damage and high casualties, though U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, figures were more measured. Official tallies eventually settled on 13 U.S. service members killed in combat during the roughly 40-day period of major hostilities, with over 380 wounded, many returning to duty after minor injuries, though dozens suffered serious trauma. Additional non-combat or indirect deaths occurred, but the combat losses from missile and drone strikes formed the core of the massacre narrative in critical coverage. The attacks, 40 days of incoming fire. The first major blow came in early March. On or around March 4-2, Iranian missiles and drones targeted a makeshift operations center at Port Shuaibah Port, in Kuwait, near Camp Arifjan. 6 U.S. soldiers assigned to the 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command were killed when the strike penetrated defenses. Reports described a direct hit on a facility housing ground-based logistics and command elements supporting air operations over the Gulf. Debris, secondary explosions from fuel or munitions, and blast overpressure claimed the lives of these troops almost immediately. Dozens more were injured in the chaos as smoke filled the air and medics rushed into the impact zone. This was not an isolated incident. Over the following weeks, Iran launched repeated salvos at U.S. and allied installations. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, home to U.S. Central Command Forward Headquarters and a massive airfield, it faced multiple waves. While Patriot and other systems intercepted many threats, leaks, and near misses caused concussions, shrapnel injuries, and operational disruptions. Some reports suggested limited penetration damage to infrastructure. Prince Sultan Air Base and other sites in Saudi Arabia. Strikes here contributed to additional casualties, including at least one confirmed death in an enemy attack. Saudi air defenses, bolstered by U.S. cooperation, engaged incoming missiles, but saturation tactics overwhelmed parts of the network. Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, a key hub for U.S. Air Force operations, including fighter and refueling aircraft. Iranian claims of major successes circulated, though verified U.S. damage was downplayed. Drone swarms and ballistic missiles created 40 days of hell for personnel rotating through alert postures, with constant shelter drills and counter-battery fire. Naval Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, Jaffer. Iranian missiles targeted this critical command node for maritime security in the Gulf. Strikes caused injuries and forced temporary repositioning of assets. The presence of U.S. Navy ships in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf made them vulnerable to coastal missile batteries, fast attack boats, and mines. Other locations: incidents in Iraq, including a KC-135 refueling aircraft loss with 6 crew members killed, though some accounts classified elements as non-hostile or accident-related amid heightened threat. Jordan and additional Kuwaiti, Shi'ars, Saudi facilities added to the toll. 1 Marine Lance Corporal died in Saudi Arabia in a reported non-hostile incident, but the broader environment of missile alerts contributed to the strain. Iran employed classic saturation tactics, mixing ballistic missiles with slower drones to overwhelm air defenses like Patriot PAC-3, THAAD were deployed, and ship-based Aegis systems. Some missiles were reported to have hypersonic-like maneuverability or low-altitude cruise profiles, complicating interception. U.S. and Allied forces responded with massive counterstrikes, destroying Iranian air defenses, naval vessels, leaving much of the regular Iranian Navy at the bottom of the Gulf, missile factories, and storage sites. CENTCOM later reported hitting over 13,000 targets, including 80% of certain air defense and naval mine capabilities. Yet the human cost on the American side mounted. The 13 deaths were distributed across services. Army sustainment troops at forward logistics nodes, Air Force personnel supporting air campaigns, Marines securing positions, and Navy sailors exposed on ships or at port facilities. Wounded numbers climbed to 381 by some counts, including traumatic brain injuries from blasts, shrapnel wounds, burns, and psychological trauma. Many heroes continued fighting despite injuries, manning radars, launching interceptors, or evacuating the fallen under fire. The 13 heroes, profiles in courage. While full official names and detailed biographies of all 13 were not immediately released in every case for operational security and family notification, public reporting and tributes highlighted their service. Here we honor them collectively and through representative stories drawn from the pattern of losses. 1-6, the Schweibe 6, March 2026. These soldiers from the 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command were logistics specialists, keeping fuel, ammunition, and supplies flowing for the air campaign. They were likely in a tactical operations center coordinating convoys when the missile struck. Their deaths underscored the vulnerability of rear area support troops in an era of long-range precision fires. Families described them as dedicated professionals who volunteered for deployment knowing the risks in a volatile region. Airman or sailor at Bahrain, Jaffer. 1 casualty linked to strikes on naval facilities. Navy personnel aboard ships or at the headquarters maintained freedom of navigation against Iranian threats, including mine-laying attempts and speedboat harassment. Their vigilance prevented worse maritime disasters. 8-9. Casualties at Prince Sultan or Saudi sites. Army troops facing drone and missile attacks while supporting coalition air operations. 1 reported death involved direct enemy action, highlighting how even defensive postures in Allied countries became front lines. 10-12. Additional Air Force and Marine losses, including personnel affected by strikes on UAE or Qatar bases. Airmen maintaining F-35s, KC-135s, or drones faced constant alerts. 1 KC-135 loss in western Iraq claimed 6 crew, adding to the toll, though details on hostile versus mechanical causes varied in reporting. The final confirmed combat death, occurring toward the later stages as Iran continued sporadic launches even as U.S.-Israeli strikes degraded its capabilities. This individual, like many, exemplified quiet professionalism, standing watch, repairing damaged equipment, or leading small teams amid incoming fire. These 13 were not frontline infantry in a conventional land war, but modern warriors in a high-tech, dispersed conflict. They operated complex systems, radar operators detecting launches hundreds of miles away, maintainers arming aircraft under threat, medics triaging blast victims, and commanders making split-second decisions on rules of engagement. Their sacrifice occurred in an environment of 24/7 tension, scud alerts, gas mask drills, given Iran's chemical history concerns, and the psychological weight of knowing 1 missed intercept could mean death. Tributes poured in from across America. Gold Star families spoke of their loved ones' commitment to protecting allies, securing global energy flows, and countering a regime that sponsored terrorism for decades. Memorial services at bases from Fort Liberty to naval stations highlighted their youth, their humor, their love of country. 1 common thread: many had deployed multiple times to the region, having seen the shadow war with Iranian proxies evolve into direct confrontation. the hellish reality of modern missile warfare. The 40 Days of Hell was defined by the psychology of persistent threat. Unlike past conflicts with clear front lines, personnel in the Gulf lived under the shadow of hypersonic timelines. Missiles could arrive in minutes from Iranian launchers. Bases implemented scud hunts, aggressive counter-battery fires, and dispersal of assets. Ships maneuvered constantly in the Gulf, relying on layered defenses, SM-3 SM-6 interceptors, electronic warfare, decoys, and close-in weapon systems. Iran's strategy blended quantity and deception. By firing dozens or hundreds of projectiles in waves, they forced defenders to expend expensive missiles. Each Patriot interceptor costs millions. Leakers got through, causing casualties and damage estimated in the billions, when including infrastructure repairs, aircraft, and munitions depletion. Reports of Iranian F-5 or other aircraft attempting strikes added another dimension, though U.S. air superiority largely neutralized traditional air threats. U.S. responses were devastating. The Navy's carrier strike groups, Air Force bombers, and Special Operations Forces degraded Iran's Navy and missile infrastructure rapidly. Yet the conflict exposed limits. Complete elimination of mobile missile launchers proved difficult in Iran's vast terrain, and proxy attacks, Houthis, Iraqi militias, complicated the battle space. Civilian casualties on the Iranian side, reported in the thousands, including tragic incidents like strikes near populated areas, fueled propaganda and international criticism, even as U.S. and Israeli officials emphasized targeting military sites. Economically, the war roiled markets. Oil prices spiked as Hormuz threats and attacks on Gulf energy facilities raised fears of supply disruption. Global shipping rerouted. Inflation fears returned and stock markets reacted to uncertainty. The ceasefire on April 7th, 8 came after intense diplomacy, with Trump administration deadlines pressuring Iran to stand down or face deeper infrastructure strikes. Iran retained some missile capability and enriched uranium, raising questions about long-term success. Strategic lessons and the human dimension. The Persian Gulf Massacre of 2026 underscores several enduring truths. First, deterrence is fragile. Iran's regime, facing existential pressure over its nuclear program, chose escalation despite knowing the mismatch in conventional power. Decades of proxy warfare and missile development gave it tools to impose costs, even if not decisive victory. Second, force protection in the missile age requires constant innovation. Air and missile defense must evolve faster than threats. Better sensors, AI-directed interceptors, directed energy weapons, and dispersed basing. The U.S. military's ability to sustain operations despite losses demonstrated resilience, but the casualties remind us that no defense is perfect. Third, the human element remains paramount. Technology enables precision, but cannot eliminate risk to the men and women who maintain, operate, and defend it. The 13 heroes died performing essential, often unglamorous tasks: logistics under fire, air traffic control amid threats, damage control on bases. Their stories echo those of previous generations, from Beirut 1983 bombings to the 2020 Soleimani-era tensions, but in an era of proliferating precision munitions. Broader context reveals Iran's long pattern of aggression. The 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, 241 U.S. Marines and others killed by Iranian-backed Hezbollah, tanker wars of the 1980s, support for IEDs killing hundreds in Iraq and Afghanistan, attacks on shipping, and more. The 2026 conflict was not unprovoked but a culmination. Critics argued the operation risked too much for uncertain gains. Supporters saw it as necessary to prevent a nuclear Iran that could blackmail the region or worse. For the wounded, over 300, 500, depending on definitions, the war continues. Traumatic brain injuries from blast waves, PTSD from relentless alerts, physical rehabilitation. The military's medical system mobilized, but reintegration brings challenges. Gold Star families navigate grief, benefits, and the search for meaning in loss. Remembering and reflecting. As of April 30th, 2026, the date marking roughly the end of the intense phase and ceasefire implementation, the 13 American heroes stand as solemn reminders of the price of vigilance in a dangerous world. Their names deserve engraving in memorials alongside fallen from other conflicts. Public discourse has included debates over strategy, intelligence, rules of engagement, and whether the operation achieved its goals of significantly setting back Iran's nuclear and missile programs. Assessments vary. Substantial degradation of infrastructure, but not total elimination. This was no video game war. It was 40 days of sirens, explosions, sweat-soaked nights in bunkers, urgent medical evacuations by Black Hawks or Osprey, and the gut-wrenching task of identifying remains amid rubble. Sailors on destroyers in the Gulf scanned horizons for small boat swarms while radars tracked inbound threats. Airmen scrambled fighters and tankers under missile warning conditions. Soldiers repaired runways cratered by impacts and maintained the flow of precision munitions that eventually turned the tide. The Persian Gulf's azure waters, once routes for peaceful commerce, became contested zones where U.S. warships enforced maritime security against a backdrop of burning oil slicks or debris from sunk Iranian vessels. The massacre label, while emotionally charged and used more by critics or sensational accounts, captures the shock of direct losses after years of proxy-dominated conflict. It forces a reckoning. America projects power globally, but pays in blood when adversaries close the distance with modern weapons. In the end, the 13 did not die in vain if their sacrifice informs better preparedness, stronger alliances with Gulf partners, who also suffered strikes and shared defense burdens, and clearer policy on containing revisionist regimes. The ceasefire, though tenuous, with reports of continued tensions, proxy activity, and disputes over Hormuz access, halted the most intense phase. Reconstruction, accountability, and deterrence. Rebuilding will define the next chapter. Yet for the families of those 13, no strategic analysis consoles the empty chair at the table, the unread texts, or the dreams deferred. They are the true cost of 40 days of hell. As a nation, we owe them remembrance, not just on Memorial Day, but an honest assessment of when and how American power is employed. The Persian Gulf remains vital. Its security demands strength, wisdom, and the willingness to honor those who bear the burden. This conflict also highlighted media dynamics. Official U.S. figures emphasized precision and minimal collateral damage, while Iranian state media and some international outlets amplified claims of massive U.S. losses, hundreds or thousands killed in exaggerated reports. Independent verification proved challenging amid fog of war, with casualty counts revised over time. Wikipedia entries and military publications eventually documented the 13 combat deaths alongside hundreds of Iranian military and civilian losses, plus impacts on allies. Technologically, the war accelerated lessons on drone swarms versus traditional air defenses, the role of naval power in contested littorals, and the need for resilient logistics. U.S. forces demonstrated the value of joint operations, Air Force strike packages supported by Navy escorts and Army air defenses. But vulnerabilities in fixed bases, even temporary ones, were exposed, pushing toward more mobile, sea-based, or hardened concepts. Geopolitically, the conflict tested alliances. GCC states balanced relations with Washington against domestic opinion and Iranian threats. Israel coordinated closely but faced its own barrages. China and Russia observed, providing diplomatic cover to Iran while assessing U.S. resolve and munition stocks. The war's economic ripple effects, higher energy prices, strained supply chains, reminded the world of the Gulf's centrality. For military historians, the 2026 Persian Gulf campaign offers a case study in limited conventional war between a superpower and a mid-tier regional state, armed with anti-access, area denial, A2AD tools. Unlike the 1991 Gulf War's air campaign or 2003's ground invasion, this was a missile and drone duel layered with special operations, cyber elements, and proxy skirmishes. The 40-day duration reflected political will to limit scope, avoiding full occupation or regime change. Ultimately, the 13 American heroes embody the best of the all-volunteer force, diverse backgrounds, united by oath to the Constitution. Some were career NCOs, mentoring juniors, others young specialists fresh from training. Their final acts, whether shielding comrades, continuing to transmit targeting data, or simply holding position, reflected training that emphasizes mission accomplishment and troop welfare, even in extremis. As April 30th, 2026 dawns with a fragile peace, the region licks its wounds. Iran assesses damage to its military and economy. The U.S. replenishes stocks and honors its dead. Gulf states rebuild ports and refineries. The Strait of Hormuz sees tentative resumption of traffic, but tensions simmer. Lessons from these 40 days will shape doctrine for years. Invest in hypersonic defense, enhance allied integration, prepare public opinion for costs, and pursue diplomacy backed by credible force. The Persian Gulf Massacre was not the largest loss in U.S. military history, nor the bloodiest chapter in Middle East conflicts. But for the families and units affected, it was profoundly personal, a concentrated hell of incoming fire that tested the limits of endurance. The 13 slaughtered by Iranian missiles remind us that war, even limited or precision war, remains a brutal enterprise where human lives are the ultimate currency. Their legacy calls for truth-seeking analysis rather than slogan-driven narratives. Did the operation meaningfully delay Iran's nuclear ambitions? Were alternatives viable? How can future deterrence prevent recurrence? These questions deserve rigorous debate, informed by declassified data as it emerges. What is indisputable is the courage displayed amid the chaos of missile alerts, the professionalism that sustained operations despite losses, and the grief that binds Gold Star communities. In reflecting on this period, one cannot ignore the human stories behind the headlines. Letters home describing the monotony broken by terror, videos of troops singing patriotic songs in shelters, acts of selflessness where one soldier dragged a wounded buddy to safety under fire. These vignettes humanize the statistics. The wounded who lost limbs or vision carry visible scars. The unseen wounds of moral injury or survivor's guilt affect many more. Broader society benefits from remembering that freedom of navigation, energy security, and counterproliferation are not abstract. They are defended by people like the 13. As technology advances, autonomous systems, AI targeting, the ethical imperative remains: minimize unnecessary suffering while accomplishing necessary missions. The 2026 war showed both the power and the limits of American military might. 40 days reshaped perceptions. Allies gained confidence in U.S. commitment even as questions arose about sustainability against peer competitors like China. Adversaries noted the costs imposed, but also the speed of U.S. degradation of Iranian capabilities. For the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the campaign exposed overconfidence in their arsenal's ability to inflict decisive damage, though their propaganda machine claimed victory. Today, on this date, as the immediate crisis recedes, we pause to honor the fallen. May their memory inspire better strategy, deeper gratitude for service members, and a commitment to peace through strength. The Persian Gulf's waters may calm temporarily, but the strategic currents run deep. The 13 heroes did their part. The living must do ours, to learn, to prepare, and to ensure such sacrifices advance security rather than futility.